How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Two Degrees Podcast, brought to you by the Play On Foundation. Today's guest, I had the pleasure of meeting him all the way back at least over a decade ago, when I started acting, maybe a decade ago.
More
And he
than.
more than, and he was in my acting class, and then he absolutely took over like the hosting scene in Toronto. And it's funny because like I also tried to apply for Much Music and as a host there, and it didn't work, and through Bell Media. And then I decided, okay, I guess I just gotta be an actor and take this, you know, take what I learned and go that direction. But this gentleman right here just wowed me in regards to all the on-screen time that he's had with the professional players that he's been around. So everybody, Akil Augustine, how you doing,
Thank
my
you,
man?
Brandon.
How's your day?
Well, it's early in my day. I don't really start work till about, well, technically, I don't get on site till about 5:30, doing the Raptors 9:05 game, the last one before All-Star break out in Mississauga,
Mhm.
suburb of Toronto. But yeah, so it's pretty early, just doing some research, kicking around the crib,
Yeah.
YouTube.
It's funny how you say like it's early for you, but then I'm on the West Coast, so it's earlier for me.
True.
So with that, like you work so closely with the Raptors. I want to start there. Where How did you get involved with them?
Oh, well, funny story, for me at least. It really started when I was working at Foot Locker, and there's this TV show back in Toronto called NBA XL, which is like I guess like a sneaker culture. I hate the word, but it was like back in the early
Wait,
2000s,
why
so
do you hate
urban.
the word?
Well, I hate the word urban because
Oh,
it's
urban. Gotcha. I thought you meant sneaker culture.
sneaker culture is whatever, man. I mean, I don't even know if there's a sneaker culture. Sneaker culture is something the marketers created too. Like I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's all the branding terms kind of irk me, but whatever.
yeah. No,
The show was
but
really cool because it
sorry,
covered all that stuff.
before you go on, just because like I don't want to lose that thought, but I also echo that same sentiment. But why? Talk to me more about the word urban.
Uh, well, first off, it's just black in disguise, right? So that's the first issue. And I think it kind of tries to trap a certain aesthetic. So you could package it, market it, which happens with everything. I just think as black people and as people who are disenfranchised, we're always sensitive to the marketing of our identity.
Hmm.
So, but it happens, right? You can call something bohemian or you can call something gothic, right? So there's terms you can
Hmm.
throw on things. But I think we're just still in a sensitive space. And it's kind of used
Yeah,
weakly. It's not used well either.
yeah, yeah. No, that's fair.
But yeah, so they,
Didn't the Grammys take that word out of their categorizations?
I hope so. I don't watch none of that stuff.
Fair.
But as the story goes, this guy named Cabby, he was the host of that show, and I was working at Foot Locker at the time. And he came into my store, and like the first time I had met someone, locally who I admired, who was on screen. So I kind of asked him to be his intern. Emailed him for months, and he never got back to me. But in a roundabout way, I ended up getting an internship at this magazine, this hip hop magazine, and the producer of his show came in to buy a full page ad, and I lied to the producer of his show and told him that Cabby said I could have an internship. So the producer told me to come down to Scarborough to the studios where they shoot the show. Showed up, Cabby shows up, he sees me there. He's like, "What the hell's going on?" I kind of like wink at him, let him know, like, I'm trying to get in. He rides with the story, and then that's kind of at the time the rights to NBA content was with Sportsnet, which is one of the major broadcasters like our ESPN. But when the Grizzlies, the Vancouver team, shut down, all the rights to the NBA content went to the company that owned the Raptors. So
Hmm.
because I was only an intern at that place, there's like a non-compete clause where they couldn't take producers. They took me as the intern to work on a couple of shows, including NBA XL. So
Wow.
that's kind of how I got in through the back door on some intern stuff.
Where did that mentality come from? of because a lot of people I know when they're applying for work, they're very, they're a little too honest sometimes. Where
Oh,
I tell them where it's just like, no, just you gotta embellish, you gotta get your foot in somehow. Where did that mentality come from for you?
um, I think I'm a big movie guy. So when I watch movies, I put myself as a protagonist. So I think I was very practiced in like wanting the opportunity to take a big risk or a big gambler to be in on something that's kind of like high stress. So like to me, it was like, yeah, this is cool. I'm gonna like work the situation. And another factor that played into it too was I was actually an illegal immigrant. So
Mm,
I didn't become a Canadian until I was 24. So I kind of had been practiced in kind of existing in the margins and doing things that fudging the paperwork or doing whatever. So I was used to that as a kid growing up. So to me, it was nothing but like just get the job done.
yeah. I can't wait to speak on that. Because I had no idea that you were working on a documentary like that, and I think that it is super brilliant um to highlight that community because especially in the talk of today's politics where refugees and allowing people with to come into your country, especially considering the climate of racism, it's yeah, no, it's well on you, good on you. So we're definitely going to get to that, but still talking basketball now. um Not only are you a host, um but you you actually like still play, you still go hard in the paint. And where did the love of basketball come?
I might have to retire soon. I just got a concussion and bruised my optical nerve elbow on a rebound. But so growing up, I came to Canada, fairly young without my parents. So I grew up without my parents also. So I had a cousin who, he had just gotten out of jail, and of course, he had just said he had to come to our house to live for, I guess my aunt was his surety. So that was part of his release program was he would have to stay with us, the family. And every Thursday night he would go down to Eastern Commerce, which is like it's not a school anymore, but it was the number one basketball high school in the entire country.
Whoa, hold on,
And then
did you
like
just
down the
say
street from my
it is
house was
not a
like,
school anymore?
no, they shut it down. It's actually a native education center now. But yeah,
Wow.
they tried to
Eastern
put
has
a dress
put
code.
out so many people, man. Damn.
Yeah, you want to know what did it?
What?
They tried to implement a dress code, and
Oh
the students
wow.
didn't want a dress code. And there were two different public schools, Monarch Park and Danforth Collegiate, who didn't
Yeah,
have dress codes. So in the last year, there were 30 kids in the school.
that's crazy. Cause me
Yeah,
having gone to a Catholic high
but
school, like dress code's normal. So
so
that's funny.
yeah, I went to a uniform school. But yeah, my cousin, when he came home, he kept taking me to the gym, and I was a rambunctious kid. I didn't do well in school. I didn't have a lot of family support or emotional support. So once I got inside the basketball court, all the rules were thrown to the window. I was bouncing off those balls, fighting older kids, doing everything, just going nuts. And I fell in love with being in the gym. And to this day, if I have a day off, if I have a couple hours, find me in the gym, man. I'm a gym rat.
Yeah. Now we're getting old, man. So what's the after gym remedy for you?
Yoga. I've fallen hard into yoga and Pilates. Just understanding, especially because I originally I played football. Like in high school, I was a football player.
Hmm.
I just couldn't go anywhere because of my immigration status. But I was a pretty good football player. I played on a really great football team. Um, so basketball was kind of my second sport. But as an adult, I discovered yoga and breath work, and those two things. It's going to be hard to
So
replace the
when you say
testosterone kick
yoga, are
and
we
some
are
of the
we
other.
talking like the Bikram style stretching, or we're because I see you do a lot of meditating. Is that the yoga that you're referring to?
Yeah. So Well, I used to do a lot of meditating, but now I've transitioned to breath work. I think breath work's been so much more efficient for me. But so I go to this place called Sweat and Tonic, and they've got a whole bunch of different variations of yoga from the vinyasana to the all that stuff. I don't even know how to say it properly. Yeah. But so I do whatever they're doing. But I've just found hot yoga. You work up a great sweat, and I think for men, especially as we get older, our hips get real tight, and I got real issues with like activating my glutes and my hips. And yoga just directly addresses all that. So it's got me feeling pretty good in my 39th year.
Yeah. No, stretching and especially hot yoga, just because, especially for me, I work out just for mobility. I don't want to, reach over something when I'm lying down in bed and then hurt myself. Or like, I don't want to do a
functional mobility.
Exactly. I think that's where fitness should be at. But I personally blame media and society, especially North American society, where they think going to the gym, you have to attain this certain physique, where I was heavy into that mindset. And I think that needs to change in order to create more balance, especially for mental health. But with that, how did you discover?
I think it reflects in who we were at the time, though.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Huh?
And how did you go about and discover breath work? Because I think that's amazing, and I think more people need to understand how important your breath really is.
Yeah, I mean, breath work is a big part of yoga, meditation, mindfulness, Buddhism. But they always just use the word breath, right? Follow your breath. That's kind of where it's been at. I think in the last 20 years, so much research has been done about, nasal breathing and the effects of, a meditation practice, which is a lot of breath work. And I think as we as North Americans, we like to break things down into their smaller parts, right? Where we look at things mechanically, like the world's a machine. And so I think we started to extract a lot of the things out of mindfulness and meditation that worked. And one of the things a lot of these like authors and scientists and social scientists picked up on is, just breath work. And then we've been doing it like from way back when therapists used to tell people breathe and count to 10, right? It's been something that's known, but now it's like, and especially with like high level sport, starting to understand how the respiratory system affects recovery and performance. I think as all of this information rises, I think then like I kind of, with my like YouTube habits, stumbled upon a lot of information about this stuff. And I think it was Joe Dispenza who really brought it home. He's, I don't know, a lot of people think he's like a pseudoscientist. He's an author. He was a chiropractor. He's got a book called, what is the book called? What is his book called? I forget what Joe Dispenza's book is called, but it digs deep into, a lot of what they call psychosomatic healing or, spontaneous remissions in certain conditions.
Yeah.
So
it's funny that you classify it as a pseudoscience, because I recently just read that.
Well, I don't. Some people do.
Yeah, but that it's funny that they think that and they laugh at it, because like, I read that everything is technically a pseudoscience. Because science is constantly changing. Science is supposed to be law. Science is supposed to be, fact. But then when it changes, that means what we were believing wasn't the fact. So then we have to understand that everything as it evolves is changing. So it can't quite be a science. It has to be a pseudoscience, because right now we're just in this state of believing that this is accurate. So.
Well, you just hit the nail on the head right there. Science is a faith.
Yeah.
It's actually a faith in the way it's executed and the way it's understood. And most things must be, if you understand how reality works. It's not like we're working with a lot of like the base building blocks of the universe and we understand how things are derived, that we have some greater grasp of what's going on. No, it's mostly guesstimates and hypotheses that we're acting on. And those are the same as what the people in the earliest days ran off of when they created the religions of the world, right? So, I mean, it's based on something that appeals to us. more so in our rational minds, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where we're at, and which speaks to your point earlier that I wanted to touch on, like, how like for a long time, like we looked at bodybuilding and exercise as aesthetics, but I think that was a reflection of where we were at as a collective in North America. And I think as we exhausted the gains of aesthetics, we kind of discovered something beyond that, and that's kind of how it's always going to work. Same with science, right? It's like you get to that frontier, and then that frontier becomes, every day, and then there's a new frontier after every day.
Do you think then that's gonna be the trend, or do you hope? And I have hopes, especially how the trend that I've noticed is the youth of today seem to be picking up on things a lot faster. So I hope that in like 50 years, 100 years, that kids come into the world and they don't seek that, need for the six-pack abs to impress, because they just have a better understanding. That's my hope, at least.
Well, we're confronting a whole new issue now with the metaverse, and that a lot of kids, may not even be exercising, because now, so your body image could be an avatar in the greater sense, more so than the human body. And then beyond that, you think about what we're capable to do with genetics and what we're capable to do with, biotechnology. And the shift may go from, holistic health and healing to, technological improvement of the human through biotechnology, right? So,
Damn.
Again, that's the next frontier, right? Like there's so many, and then as information speeds up, there's splinters and groups, and some groups will end up in the metaverse, some will end up in real life, and some will end up biohacking into biotechnology. And it's weird, but we're getting really segmented as we get more powerful, and it's kind of it's odd.
That's just also too like a reflection of how religion happened, where religion happened as this one thing, and then all of a sudden it was like, no, let's just change this thing, and then there'd be like, oh, I want to do this thing and this thing, and then it just
the Anglicans and the Presbyterians.
Yeah, it's so funny too with like Christianity, where there's so many factions of Christianity. It makes me laugh, where Christianity is no longer that thing that it once was, because now it's I don't want to say
I still
adulterated versions of it, but yeah.
I still don't know what the difference is between a Catholic and a Christian, and I'm Roman Catholic apparently.
Catholics believe that Jesus is God, when the Christians believe that Jesus is the Son of God.
Well, how did I went to Roman Catholic school.
Yeah.
And I didn't even figure that one out.
And then the belief of Mother Mary being holy, where Christians don't really see her as reverend as Catholics do.
See, look, even that division is ridiculous to me.
Yeah. And then even and then I think like the difference with like Protestants is the Protestants are the ones that speak in tongues, and
they want divorce.
They want divorce, and
the king wanted his divorce.
Baptists, I think Baptists and Seventh-day Adventists treat Saturday as their Sabbath. There's too much, and then I know there's some factions that don't believe in the Old Testament. It's just New Testament, which I find hilarious, because it's like just the opposite of Judaism, where the Judaism will take the Old Testament and not really focus on the New Testament. But have you read Autobiography of a Yogi?
I did a while back.
Yeah.
Is that Yogananda?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that was big. Oh man, there's one chapter in there where he describes like his experience in, maybe it was the Bardo or something. It was one of the most beautifully written chapters of. I gotta go back and read that chapter, because that chapter was mind blowing.
When his guru like decided to, it's like, all right, you're ready, and then just tapped him on the chest, and like he just
on some Doctor Strange shit.
Yeah. Speaking of, are you a fan of the MCU?
I mean, I was a huge fan of the MCU during the first 25 films.
Okay. Because like in the trailer, my attention goes towards more the politics of the MCU, where Marvel, when they first started, they weren't doing too well, so they had to sell Spider-Man, they had to sell X-Men, and then they kept the rights to Iron Man. But then now with the whole multiverse thing and the MCU,
They didn't keep the rights to Iron Man. Ain't nobody want Iron Man. Iron Man was shit. Who you do Iron Man?
But then, and then in Doctor Strange 2, well, I guess they started it in WandaVision when they incorporated Pietro, but then they're bringing X-Men characters into the MCU, and I'm so happy to, because I think I heard Patrick Stewart's voice.
Yeah, he's in the trailer. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a couple of interesting angles they're playing with that. They believe there's one theory that Agatha Harkness, one of the characters from WandaVision,
Yeah.
she's got her own series out called House of Harkness.
Yeah.
And if you're a fan of the comic books, you know that House of M is the comic where Wanda snaps all of the mutants out of existence. So some people think they're gonna do like a House of M, but a House of what's her face, and have a snap of the mutants into the main MCU. Others believe that it's through the multiverse that we'll get the X-Men characters into the plot, some new X-Men characters, but because of the multiverse, you get maybe some old, like currently casted type characters.
I'm excited. I'm not.
It's getting really big though. Like I really love the Avengers. I didn't care for the Iron Man movies. I really loved the Avengers when they came together.
Yeah.
I thought that was the best shit. And then as they built that out, but now it's like it's just the scope is so big. It's hard to keep someone's interest when like you've gone from like, okay, we got 10 characters to 500 characters.
Yeah, where it went from Age of Ultron, where you had them assemble, to Civil War. Now they're against each other. And then I remember like they had this meme of like what people expected, and you had like a big clash in the comics versus what you got, where it was just like 7 on
parking lot.
Parking
lot, man.
And then so it's like, and then they grew it to that final.
But I liked how they did it. I liked how they did Civil War. I thought Civil War was pretty good. I think two of the best Marvel movies that are in existence are Civil War and the second Captain America, The Winter Soldier. That movie was dope AF.
Yeah.
Those are two of my favorite Marvel movies of all time, man. Like The Winter Soldier
on the show. All right, that's
this would be when Samuel L. Jackson runs into the Winter Soldier in the streets. That is one of the bombest scenes I've ever seen. Like he came out guns blazing.
Oh man, Bucky's arc is just fascinating to me. Just because like he did a complete 180 from Winter Soldier to living in Wakanda, and he just zenned out. And personally, that's like
which was good.
Yeah.
Until they did that stupid Winter Soldier series or whatever, the Captain America series. That thing was garbage.
You didn't like it?
No.
Interesting.
It was hyper political, and then all of a sudden, Bucky is like this sweetheart. Like that guy is like one of the coldest killers of all time. It's kind of like what they did with Boba Fett. They just turned Boba Fett into a bumbling idiot. Like I don't know why they do this. They just want everyone to be friendly now. It's like no, those two guys are master assassins. They should not be, like your happy main character.
I think that's like the joy of it is we know that our generation knows that. But then for the new generation, now they have a different outlook. So like we're seeing this
But they're less cool. They're less memorable now. Like what made Boba Fett dope was you didn't see his face, you didn't hear his voice, you didn't know his backstory, but he came to F up,
Yeah, no, that's true.
Right? And like now he's just this old pudgy dude helping Tatooine or whatever that place is called.
No, man, like back in the day, Clone Wars was my shit. And just seeing like them go to the island, the planet where they were making everybody essentially in the vein
Or
of
Mandalore?
no.
Oh, you mean where they built the clones?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that big water planet? Yeah, that's where my head was at, and I just, oh man, and the origin story where Django gets killed, and
Yeah, that Boba Fett show sucked, by the way. I was gonna say that.
I'm excited for the Obi-Wan though. I'm an Obi fan.
I want them to get into the books more. I want to get into like the further out characters. Like get away from the whole Star Wars we already know. Take the Star Wars world and move it a couple thousand light years into the future, and let's see what happens then. Right? Like do like an old Republic, but in the future.
Yeah. I have fingers crossed. I don't know if you can see it. This is my baby right here. This is like a show slash series that I'm working on. That's like you have Star Trek and Star Wars, and then have you seen the movie Old Guard with Charlize?
Yeah.
And
They're
then
doing a sequel.
I associate Old Guard with like Star Trek in this comparison. So this is Star Wars compared to that. So it's like
Also, a lot of old dead people coming back.
yeah. So I'm hoping that again, just the ball gets rolling on a few things, and I can find myself in the room with the right people, and I can share that with them. And
You can do like a short first, like a.
I want to turn it into a graphic novel first. I want
That's a good idea. That's a good idea.
So I'm currently working on a kid's book, and I think you'd relate to it as well. But and then from that, yeah, we'll see how what rooms I can enter as a writer. That's the goal is to show people that hey, I'm also a writer, because that's been what's been your struggle with being able to define yourself professionally, where for me I don't want to call myself a writer, even though I've written, I haven't gotten paid for it yet. So that's my defining thing, is like, because I haven't gotten paid for it yet, I don't want to say that I am it yet. What's it been like for you?
I think like everyone else, it's validation. I think a lot of times you lose track of why you're in what you're doing. I think for me, I got involved. I'm a creator. I'm a storyteller by trade. Whatever that means to other people, I have a pretty clear definition of what it means to me. And I think when I got into the world professionally, I went into basketball because it was one of the few places where a young Black man could make strides and be accepted in the way I do carry myself. And I think as I worked in that world, I adopted the success markers of that world. And so I started to get goals that probably weren't in line with the big picture of what I was actually trying to accomplish if I were to step back. So not until like
Can you give me an example?
Like wanting to be a play-by-play announcer. Like that's not why I came in here. Like, not wanting to interview players after games is not why I started to do this, right? I'm a storyteller. I want to, back when I was younger, telling like a Patrick Ewing or a Charles Barkley or a Michael Jordan story was crazy and it was interesting. But I think as the game in the NBA has gotten more streamlined, the kids get more similar. They all go to prep schools, they all have managers, they're all media controlled. The types of stories I was telling weren't really what I wanted to do. And so I started to adopt like, I'm doing play-by-play. Oh, I'm getting this interview. Oh, and to say that was like true markers of success for me, they weren't, simply because knowing why I'm in this, I'm a storyteller by trade. So my goal is to best communicate the ideas that resonate with me as a person. So as I failed to reach a lot of those markers recently, it sobered me up to realize that like I was striving for things that I didn't want. And so again, the whole validation thing came full circle because I'm working on this documentary now, and the documentary is more about the story I'm telling than it is about anything outside of the act of creating. So there's very little external validation that I seek from making this documentary, other than making sure I tell this story correctly, and that the way I go about telling the story fits with the models that I built, or if not, stretches them and allows me to understand them more. And I think, thankfully, it was, failing at certain things that I thought I wanted, that allowed me to kind of take the few steps back, recognize the opportunity I did have to actually just work on creating something without having it need to satisfy any external measures. So that way, at least at the end of this project, I'll know what I can create and not know, what I had to create for this, or
and it's
I achieved the thing I wanted, or I got the, no, it's like, look at the thing I made. Now I know what I can make.
With that, yeah, no, let's dive into it, because I'm so curious to know how your voice of a storyteller developed into the voice that's able to tell this documentary. And the documentary is called Undocumented, and it covers the 500,000 population of Canadians that are undocumented, and their, I guess, role and journey and struggles in society as undocumented citizens.
Well, it focuses on me as a representative of what that group can contribute to the country.
Okay.
So it's a lot. It's about me, but the simple fact of the matter is, an undocumented person can't stand up and say I'm undocumented. That puts them in a position of vulnerability. So you can't get undocumented people to stand up and say, "Hey, I'm undocumented." So there, and the most compelling type of story is a human interest story, where you have someone say, "Hey, here I am. Here's an actual human representation of the problem." So if they can't do that, then I think part of the responsibility falls on people who were undocumented and were able to find their way to becoming Canadian, to at least add their story to the pile, because you're going to get a lot of stories. Like, you think about how you track undocumented people. Like, you can easily track them through arrests, right? And through anything related with the criminal justice system. It's easier to find an undocumented person than any other way. You can't Google undocumented people. You can't find their stories. So if that's the only data set that you have for a group of people, how can you really understand what they represent to a country? And so my goal is to add some anecdotal evidence of, like, here is someone who was undocumented, and here is their story and what they've been able to do. And hopefully that kind of gives people a clearer picture of what the whole situation is like, right? And I think that's very important. And I'm not here to take a side in debate on immigration. It's a very sensitive topic. But what I can do is represent a small sliver of the population, which is young children who were brought here without their knowledge, with no control, and who basically grew up Canadian, because that's what I was. I came here at 4, my parents left, I was here alone, and I was left here. So, at 18, to send me back to Trinidad or to England or somewhere, that would be, in a lot of human beings' opinions, wrong, because I'm pretty much Canadian. So I think there are people out there like that who have the exact same story. And I would like to, when their case gets reviewed, when they're considering applying or not, there has to be a story out there, as opposed to, rough statistics and the general knowledge of what people think about when they think about an illegal immigrant or an illegal alien, right? Because, that's just going to weigh against them.
What was it like then in your world? When did you acknowledge and realize that, shit, I'm undocumented?
Well, I mean, my entire life there was an understanding that I couldn't do what other kids could do. No one openly spoke about it with me. I was raised with like a couple aunts and a cousin, and so it wasn't a household where I got to ask a lot of questions. So I was kind of on the outs, but I knew something was up, and it wasn't until probably the end of high school, because I couldn't work in high school. I couldn't go on trips or travel. I'd never traveled in my life. I'd never had a job or gone to the doctor. I was lucky enough to get into school. So I kind of figured as high school graduation was coming, like, like something got to give, or else I'm going to be selling drugs like a summer. Because I didn't have a social insurance number. So it's what underground telemarketing, selling drugs, working construction under the table. Those are the paths that are available to an illegal immigrant, or cleaning. Like, so those were my only career paths up until about I was 17. And luckily I had a classmate whose father was a former guerrilla in El Salvador. He had a crazy life. He was captured and tortured. He was a fundraiser who traveled all throughout Europe, supporting the students when the country got thrown into turmoil during like the Nicaraguan Contra War, when the United States was all up in South America, overthrowing democratically elected officials to support their anti-communist regime. So he came to Canada. He wasn't allowed to practice law, but he did open up a refugee center called the FCJ Refugee Center down on Broadview, down the street from my house. And so I kind of I had never told anybody my story because of how vulnerable it makes me, right? Like, it was called fucking Children's Aid or called somebody, and I'm like, God. So I confided in him the story, and so we concocted a plan, and we found a lawyer, and we filed for humanitarian and compassionate grounds around the time I was 18. It took about a 6-year process, a lot of money, a lot of court trips, and a lot of interesting events. But eventually I became a landed immigrant of Canada at around 24.
And then was that Rico?
Yeah, that was Francisco Rico, man. That's my OG, rest in peace. He actually, I never told the story even up until everyone knows me. I never told the stories publicly or anything like that. Only my closest friends knew. But Francisco had always encouraged me to tell the story. But it makes my family very vulnerable, and it's a very heated debate that I'm going to throw myself into and put a lot of unnecessary light on myself. So I never really did it. But unfortunately, Francisco died earlier this year. Not this year, but last year. I think one of the few wishes that he had of me that I never was able to fulfill was that I used my story to kind of represent this group. And unfortunately, he had to pass for me to sober up. But the timing was impeccable. That this group of students who was working on their thesis project at Ryerson University approached me, and they're extremely talented group of students. And they did their thesis project, and I watched it, and I thought that we could do more with it. And so I kind of joined them as an executive producer and kind of steered the project in a new direction. And yeah, that's where we're at, man.
So then, did they approach you for their thesis, or did they just have a similar concept of telling a story of undocumented Canadians?
No, they approached me. One of the things I do is I do a lot of youth outreach. So I've always been in the schools. I work with a lot of schools. I work with Boys to Men. I work with Ryerson University. I work with Riverdale Technical School. I work with my old high school in McNeil. So I'm in the community a lot. So I think and I do a lot of mentoring with young people. And so there are 2 kids within the group of students who had some interactions with me throughout the past, who my story resonated with them. And in their great understanding of they really wanted a compelling story for their thesis project, they approached me kind of knowing bits and pieces of my story and understanding it would be a good story for them to cut their teeth on and tell. And that's kind of how it happened.
Did you have the intent of telling the story through a documentary? Or did you have any plans of maybe a book, maybe a news article, maybe a blog or something?
No, man, I didn't, because of my family. I think the big thing for me that changed everything was therapy. I entered therapy probably around this time last year, and I had a lot of early childhood trauma that I hadn't unpacked, and I think a lot of my maturation had been stunted around certain ages, around a lot of events that I had, experienced. And I think, a year and a bit of trauma and a lot of deep work on myself got me to the point where I kind of came to terms with the fact that, it is my story, and I am a storyteller. And as much as it would disappoint whoever it be, my mom, my dad, my sister, my uncle, for people to know what had happened to me, their shame isn't my burden to carry. And if I feel like I want to be open about my experiences, I didn't owe them dishonesty to myself. And so I think that was the hardest thing, was knowing, I like my family, like I have nothing against them. And I think people who watch my story could walk away, feeling a certain way about what happened to me.
Yeah.
And I didn't want people to look at my family like they were purposely, trying to harm me or anything. It's just how things played out.
Yeah, that's a very difficult part to navigate in somebody's life, to kind of understand that their life is their life, and they don't intend to, bring down the people that came before them, type thing. But it's not about bringing them down. It's about the bigger picture, where
Yeah, I wonder about that when I see some of these like documentaries about people and stuff. Like, I wonder how it all played. I want to see the documentary about how the documentary went down. Like, what were those conversations like when you told your mom you were going to tell every dark story about your past? And what was her reaction like? Because that itself is a story.
Yeah, the making of Undocumented. Oh
yeah.
Now, with that, as an artist, like, it's not up to you to decide what change you're gonna create, but what is your hopes with this? What do you hope is gonna change?
I just want to add another stack of piece of paper on the stack. I think there's no data. There's no data. So at least to add some anecdotal storytelling to the conversation around a specific set of illegal immigrants, because I don't have the answers. I'm not here to say open the floodgates. I'm not here to say close the doors either. More less that than the other, right? But I am here to say that there's a group of people that are a huge part of the future of this country that can really contribute, specifically young children who were brought here without their knowledge, who grew up in the system. And I think we can somehow make the process for those people a little more accommodating, so that they spend less time in the margins where they can be taken advantage of. Kind of like a children's welfare for immigration. So where like we can, I don't know. I don't have the answers, and I want to start the conversation. And then maybe with this documentary, we start the conversation, and some more intelligent people than me step up to the plate and come up with some, whether it's policy or incentive or whatever. We at least entertain the conversation.
Fair. Now, do you think then you had a what's a way to phrase this? But growing up as undocumented, and you said that you missed out on a lot of opportunities that other kids had, where was your mind at then when you realized that you couldn't do these things that other people were doing?
I was hurt and I was angry. In the beginning, I disassociated a lot. So I suffered from depression at a very early age. So I had the ability to disassociate from my mind and my body, which fed my imagination. So I was a constant daydreamer, to the point where I would get sick daydreaming. But it was just like I had to get out of the physical space that I was in. And I think as I got older, and I'm very thankful that my cousin brought me around some of the individuals he brought me around who were, some frightening souls. But I think I had so much anger in me. And because I wasn't in a place where I was either supported or allowed to express my anger, I found ways to intensify everyday actions. And so, if people hang out with me, they always end up saying, like, that guy does like everything, like, like just it's a lot. Like I've found ways to add energy to small parts of the day. And I think that's how I get a lot of my frustrations out, because I'm an easily frustrated individual. And I think that comes from a lot of the energy that I never got to dispel as a child.
Can you go into detail and talk about how you used to deal with your depression, into finding therapy, into how you deal with things now?
Yeah. Drugs, God, meditation was part of it. I would escape into meditation. It's a high level form of
Even before
avoidance.
therapy, that's what you'd seek out
Yeah, I
meditation?
discovered meditation very early. I used to go to like a Buddhist synagogue at Queen in Ossington back when I was
Oh,
like
wow.
19, 20. So I had discovered meditation pretty early because it helped with my depression. But I think I've used everything. Like I used sports to distract myself. I've used marijuana to distract myself. I had a deep spiritual phase where I started doing DMT and LSD and mushrooms. You know, I've used books as a form of escape. I think I channel a lot of energy to performance. I perform, as a performer. That takes a tremendous amount of energy. So I channeled a lot of my energy to that. So my life was basically one big coping mechanism. I'm not sure that there was ever a point or place in my life where I've ever felt safe or that I wasn't on the job in a certain sense.
Mm-hmm. You use an interesting word that I kind of want to explore: escape. You use things to escape. What's your take now on those methods of escapism?
Well, so there's this concept that they have called the loyal soldier. It was birthed out of Japan. After the Japanese dropped a lot of their soldiers in Vietnam during the war, they lost the war. A lot of these soldiers ended up stuck in Japan, in Vietnam, on islands, cut off for like 20, 30 years. Mm-hmm. And then, they started to find them and they brought them home to Japan and they didn't know what to do with them. And you look in stark contrast to what the United States does with their veterans. What Japan did was they started to celebrate them and welcome home. And they had this thing called welcoming home the loyal soldiers. And so some psychotherapists have adopted that idea to welcoming home your loyal soldiers. So when I was a kid, I was pretty vulnerable and I wasn't, being taken care of. And so my escaping from my physical environment saved me. So I have to recognize that I've been conditioned to escape because that was the right thing to do at that time. Now, I may have outgrown that space where I'm no longer in constant threat. So I don't need that soldier to be of service, but I do have to give him time. So I got to welcome home my loyal soldier. So for me, I tried to do a lot of things cold turkey and stuff like that. But I had to understand that things have, their season and their reason, their time. Like I'm glad to say a year without alcohol. Don't do psychedelics anymore. Not that I'm against them, just I don't have a reason to do them anymore. I'm pretty, I'm pretty good, man. I'm doing all right. I still have my vices, but they're all things that I can control to a certain extent.
Fair. I love going into discussions and details with my guests in the world of mental health. How did you go about identifying your depression? Because I still feel like we're in an age where people deny their depression. How did you notice that was what you were going through?
I think as the culture recognized it, I recognized it. I will say too, there was a stretch in my life in my 20s when I was so busy that I wasn't depressed. There's a stretch in my late 20s where I was so involved. I had a girlfriend. I was working. I was busy. I was really involved in life, and it wasn't until I started living by myself. I broke up with my girlfriend. I moved out from, I had shared space with my sister and her husband in a house for a while. We lived together. And it wasn't until I started to spend extended periods alone that I started to recognize a lot of these issues and then started to participate in drinking alone and stuff like that. And I think that brought back a lot of the childhood demons, and those demons would have been there, and I probably just would have like, caked over it, and could continue to live a life of moderate alcohol abuse and ill health. But it was probably a blessing that I did get that time to spend by myself to kind of revisit the foundational blocks of my personality and the things I suffered with, I struggled with. Sorry.
Now with that, because there's always like a silver lining and a blessing in everything, what are some blessings that you think were bestowed upon you by being undocumented?
Oh my God. Everything. It's so weird how like I have a saying, and I said this before I even realized I was saying it about me. Bad things can be good things too. I think because I was undocumented at a very early age, I realized that like it was on me, and not just being undocumented, but having no parents. So from about 5 years old, I was pretty much accountable for how I managed my own emotions, how I managed my time, what expectations were set upon me, because there's no singular person that had a direct interest in me as a human being throughout most of my life. So a lot of my accountability comes from me, because like I don't have like someone I talk to on the phone every day, week, month, or whatever. It's just me. Whether that be healthy or not, I think it is bestowed upon me this. I don't know, because sometimes I'll talk to people and they have a hard time doing stuff, and like but I think a lot of times when we grow up, people do things for us, and then we start to expect help, and we start to expect support, and we start to expect kindness, and we start to expect friendliness, and we start to expect. And I think I was robbed of all of those expectations. So I conduct myself pretty with like I don't need much from people in terms of like I could work with people who are hostile towards me. I can get the job done in 3 minutes if it's needed, 2 minutes if needed, because I've been in the situation where it's like, okay, it's the stakes have been so high that I've had to realize what I'm capable of. For a lot of people, they don't get pushed into a situation where they have to realize I'm capable of all of this. So they're forever running on like, I think this is my max. Where I've been in, a lot of tough situations. So I've had to figure out exactly what I'm capable of. So now there's an expectation that when shit hits the fan that I can pretty much handle it.
When was the last time you surprised yourself of, oh shit, I can do this?
Therapy, man.
Damn, that's deep. How did you discover therapy?
I had a hard time eating. I was I don't know, food abuse is a type of thing, but there's definitely.
Oh, of course it is.
I had some stuff with food, and I tend not to eat. And I had a friend who I got close to with over COVID, and she would notice like I wouldn't eat like I'd maybe eat like 2 pieces of fruit for like 2 days. She's like, why are you not eating? I was like, I have a hard time getting to eat and convincing myself to eat, to take care of myself, and to set time aside. And one thing that I was so busy was COVID. And so I think the food thing kind of like was the tipping point where I realized, yeah, that's because no one spends a lot of time with me. I spend a lot of time in isolation, that I don't notice the little weird nuances of my daily routine. And so when she got to spend some extended time with me, she started noticing really weird things about how I conducted myself. And that's one of the dangers of being in isolation a lot. But luckily, she was someone who had enough, social capital with me that she could say, hey, there's something up with this. And she actually had a friend who was a therapist, who actually ended up being my therapist, who is a fucking godsend.
Wow. Was there at any point you thought you not eating was, because I'm just going back to Autobiography of a Yogi, where it's like you have these yogis that don't eat. Did you ever think where it's like, maybe this is
I had tons of misgivings about myself as some kind of special individual, like accessing the fucking Akashic records, and like my Kundalini's lit, and I was doing it all. And the funny thing was, all that is true too. But the problem was, when I wasn't grounded in proper in a proper identity. Like I can engage in the highest spiritual practices, and I'm very fond of them, and I believe in them. But I'm also like a meat sack and with a mind. And I think I needed to get to the basics of being a human being and to understand my relation to time and space and food and routine and my self-identity and my relationships with my parents and my day-to-day practices with other people and how I approach work and coworkers. And I think I spent so much time in the high realm of spirituality that the real world practical applications of things weren't where they could be, which is weird because I was still getting good results to a certain extent, but more professionally than personally.
Gotcha. So the good results weren't your personal. It's not good. It's you're indifferent, but it's good because other people are like, yeah, this is great, and we're gonna run with
it. It's like, oh yeah, get married, yeah, have kids, yeah, buy a house. It's like there is this pre-existing checklist, and I was in the basketball broadcast where I was doing, and I was like, yeah, get your own TV show, do sideline for a little bit, do a little play-by-play, then maybe you get jumped and then do some ESPN, and then you jump to like you get your own team and do a broadcast, and then I got the G League jobs, like, oh, now I got my own team, my own broadcast, and then like I lost that job, and fucking brought back, and then you start questioning it, and you're like, yeah, man, those were a lot of markers that were set by the system, and really all I did. The only reason I came here was to play.
Yeah. And it's so funny that you say that it was set by the system, but it was the system that you were not documented in.
Yeah. Yeah, man. But we do hand off a certain amount of autonomy. It falls on my lap too. But I mean, it's hard as a human being to recognize all this stuff.
Yeah. Now, you've been gracious enough to lend me all of this time, and it's been an incredible conversation thus far from my side, hopefully on your side as well. But I think I need to also get this question in before I forget, but in the vein too of talking about blessings and stuff, I want to know your perspective and how it was on your end when the Raptors won the championship. What was that like?
Surreal. It was hard because like we were working so hard, and I'm talking about a lot of the people who work in the Toronto basketball industry. It was like the whole world had descended upon Toronto for the finals. So like as much as you wanted to be a fan while it was happening, everybody had their responsibility, whether it was security, whether it was broadcast, whether it was whatever. So like it was like ESPN was there, Turner was there, like, you know what I'm saying? Like everybody was there. So like all of our shows were getting watched. So I think everybody was a little bit more stressed than usual. It was surreal. It's hard to say that you got a chance to enjoy it, but I enjoy every time I remember it. You know, it was one of those ones where when you're living it, you're really living it. Time slowed down, but it was also like you were on the nice edge because, like, you know, I was on Kimmel. You wanted to look good when you went on stage with Kawhi and do the interview. You didn't want to stutter. You wanted to ask the right questions. You wanted to look good, right? Or you know, saying like you were on CP24 the next morning, but you were out partying, but you still want to make it a party with your friends, and you want to party with the players, but you don't want to cross the line of media. And it's like there's all this stuff that's like going on over the week, and you're just having a time. And it really isn't until like, you know, like later on in the summer when I ran into one of my boys, and he's like, "Yo, I was at the parade and I saw you on the float, and you showed me this video of me like just acting the fool." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, we did that shit."
That's dope, man. Yeah, that that parade. I was in Vancouver at the time, so I missed all of it. But my boys were in that, and they're in the thick of it, and that was just energy.
People died.
Yeah,
or someone got shot at least, I think.
Oh,
it was crazy.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I don't know if this is just my projection onto Toronto, but I'm surprised that little happened. Like I thought downtown was going to be a riot zone by the end of it.
I couldn't believe how many people came.
Yeah, that was
weird. I was like, what?
Yeah.
So
No,
I'm scared for when the Leafs win because they're just gonna burn the city down.
it's because there's a particular genre of people. There's a particular type of people who watch hockey that tend to get rambunctious in those
Oh yeah,
sports.
they're called hockey players. Jesus, those
Um,
guys are rowdy.
so going from this incredible high and energy of the city and you having all of these responsibilities, what was the contrast then when all of a sudden everything went to the NBA bubble?
Shit, it's depressing.
Eesh.
I mean, especially for our team, because our team, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
we had the best fan base. We had a thing going. We were rolling. We still had Gasol and Ibaka before they left. So like it was things looked good. And then the bubble really derailed it. But shouts out to the Raptors because they kind of found their strategy. I mean, it was bad for us. Plus, we followed that up with another year in Tampa. So that sucked. And I think, and then the COVID, that blew chunks.
Yeah, yeah. Ugh, COVID. But man, Akil, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insight and your experiences as well. And do you have like a potential release date for
Well, we're
Undocumented?
trying to get it to TIFF.
Mm,
So we're going to be, there's about 42 film festivals that we're applying to. We'll do a private screening here in Toronto in April. So if you're in the city, let me know. But we're going to try and do the festival route first.
nice. Dope. Awesome. I got to give a shout out to Ryerson because they do have an incredible film program, and so I'm thrilled that you're working with these students because I remember when I first started acting and I was like looking for short films to like get myself into. Ryerson, like they've evolved a lot. So
It won't be
I'm
Ryerson for very long. They have to change the school name.
what to what?
I don't know what they're going to change it to, but Ryerson is one of the guys who started the whole, what is it, that native school system that they
The
had?
residential school system?
The residential school system. He's one of the founding fathers of that.
Why did
So they're
I
going to,
not associate that Ryerson would be a last name? I just thought that'd be I thought Ryerson was just like a noun, like University of Toronto, you know?
no, it's a whole ass dude who owned a plot of land, started a
Damn.
school. He probably has a bigger story than that, but yeah, he's a controversial figure here in Canada right now.
Oof. Yeah. That's a whole other discussion, and I don't know if you have any insight on it or opinions on it, but maybe we can bring you back. But like
Oh, for
immigration,
you, anytime, man. I got
oh,
you. Let's do
appreciate
this.
that. But like immigration and indigenous rights, like
I can get you
I
some people too. I know some people. I got some homies out there up north doing some good work in the community.
sweet, awesome. Yeah, no, we've had a couple of indigenous activists come on here and give us insight on the climate of racism, but I want to dive more deep into the world of like, as you said, undocumented, where immigrants coming here, they fall into the North American mindset and they just go with what, you know, the white man says. So it's
The
like,
colonizer philosophies.
right? So it's like I also want that to be brought to the forefront eventually, where it's like if you're coming to this country and you're an immigrant, understand that, you know, you don't have to become where you're going. Sure,
But that's
you
a
want to,
conversation of power.
yeah, yeah,
Immigrants don't have a lot of power when they come in. The power dynamic is severely thrown off.
yeah. But then it's like with that,
Sucks.
you got to retain some power. You got to retain some of that
Yeah,
identity as you
definitely.
come.
I definitely hold on to my Trinidadian roots for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, man, Akil, thank you so much for coming out. You're
Thank you for doing this, man.
you're a light, and I wish you all the best with Undocumented, and I'll be following along on your socials for that. But yeah, thank you again, man.
Gang, gang, let's go.
Everybody, thank you for tuning in today for the 2 Degrees podcast brought to you by the Play On Foundation. Akil Augustine, an incredible soul. Follow him, check him out. And as soon as Undocumented hits Netflix and Amazon Prime and all of those streaming services, because I'm sure that it has a lot of legs to travel on, check that out. But other than that, ingat kayo.